Hey everyone, welcome back to iWizard. Today we're going to be talking about steampunk, a really interesting subgenre of fantasy and science fiction. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the 10 steampunk novels I want to read. Alright, Jordan here. So I want to start out by explaining what led me to make this video. I decided to make this video because, guys, I've always been fascinated by this interesting niche little subgenre of fantasy and science fiction, its themes, its sort of aesthetic trappings. Now, I haven't read very many steampunk novels, but I've seen a few films, and I'm thinking about movies like the Sherlock Holmes movies starring Robert Downey Jr. There was that more recent one, Mortal Engines. That was pretty cool. And then I'm thinking of things like Wild Wild West with Will Smith and Kevin Kline. If you were a Gen Xer or millennial, you've probably seen that. But look, guys, there are so many steampunk books out there, so many young adult books, so many like paranormal steampunk romance type books that I decided to do some research and try to separate the wheat from the chaff. I said if I'm going to get into this genre, I don't want to read the swill. I want to read the best of, right? So as the late Harold Bloom used to say, he who reads must choose. So I did my research, and we're going to go through what I have decided are the 10 steampunk novels I most want to read. But first, as always, let us get some context. What is steampunk? So steampunk is a subgenre of science fiction that blends the technology and aesthetics of the 19th century with other elements and tropes that you would see in modern science fiction. The technology featured in steampunk novels is usually just as advanced as that of regular science fiction novels, but they use steam as an energy source instead of electricity, gas, or oil. Although I will say in some stories, the society is just on the cusp of in discovering electricity, as in this graphic novel here by Warren Ellis. Sometimes there's another more potent form of electricity that is just being discovered, and then you combine that with Victorian gadgets and ends up being a really cool combination. Typically, steampunk stories are set in the Victorian period, some kind of alternative history version of the Victorian period, although sometimes you do see Wild West steampunk or even steampunk that is set deep in the future, and for whatever reason technology is being suppressed and they have to use Victorian era technology, or for whatever reason technology is set back. Anyhow, typically you have these weird anachronistic technologies, retro-futuristic inventions and gadgets, technology like steam cannons, zeppelins, and lighter-than-air ships, Babbage-style analytical engines and computing machines, mechanical robots, giant analog clocks, rotating propellers and dials and gears. In fact, that's a huge one in steampunk, gears everywhere. But I would say that one of the really cool things about steampunk is that you also get that Victorian fashion, that over-the-top Victorian fashion, the Victorian architecture with the narrow streets and that urban London feel with brownstones and cobblestone streets, and just the sense of late 19th century manners and propriety. Typically there are scientific and academic societies, and you just kind of get that noir aesthetic of Edgar Allan Poe meets Arthur Conan Doyle. So you definitely get elements of crime fiction, horror, urban fantasy with steampunk. And the last thing I'll mention, I did a little bit of research and I learned that the term steampunk first appeared in 1987 in a letter sent to Locus magazine by the writer K.W. Jeter, one of the original steampunks. Christopher Rocchio told me that. Apparently, Jeter jokingly used the word steampunk to describe this kind of new experimental Victorian style of fiction that he was writing with his two other buddies, Tim Powers and James Blaylock. And so here's a letter that Jeter wrote to Locus magazine. He says, "Dear Locus, enclosed is a copy of my 1979 novel Morlock Night. I'd appreciate your being so good as to route it to Farron Miller, as it's a prime piece of evidence in the great debate as to who in the Powers-Blaylock-Jeter fantasy triumvirate was writing in the gonzo historical manner first." And keep in mind, this is a letter from Jeter to Locus magazine, and this is apparently the first time that the term steampunk was used. Cyberpunk had already been a term. He says, "Personally, I think Victorian fantasies are going to be the next big thing, as long as we can come up with a fitting collective term for Powers, Blaylock, and myself. Something based on the appropriate technology of the era, like steampunks, perhaps." K.W. Jeter. And by the way, the novel Jeter is talking about, Morlock Night, it's pretty cool. The premise is basically what would happen if the Morlocks from H.G. Wells' The Time Machine had hijacked the time machine and traveled back into the past to menace Victorian London. So if you remember, the Morlocks are these creatures that exist far in the deep future, who live underground and terrorize the surface-dwelling Eloi. But I guess in Morlock Night, King Arthur shows up to save the day. King Arthur and Merlin show up from the past and save England. So that is pretty cool. All right, without further ado, let us get to the list. These are my top 10, but I want to say that these books are not ranked, obviously, because I haven't read the books, so I wouldn't even be able to rank them if I wanted to. So the order here is actually random. Also, I'm not saying that these are the 10 best steampunk novels. I'm saying that they're the 10 books I want to read. Keep in mind, I won't be including some works that I know other people consider to be steampunk novels, like H.G. Wells' Time Machine or Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. These are basically just science fiction novels that were written during the Victorian period, and I think it's kind of just unfair to call them steampunk. Okay, number 10 from 1990, The Difference Engine. This is a classic, perhaps the classic steampunk novel penned by two sci-fi greats, William Gibson and Bruce Sterling, the cyberpunk novelists. The premise of The Difference Engine is another simple what-if question. What if Charles Babbage had actually developed a real computer during the Victorian age instead of a partially completed gear-based one that he actually did develop? So what would happen if the Victorian period was rocked by the advent of computers? This book won a bunch of different awards and helped to launch the steampunk genre and make it what it is. Next up, number 9, The Warlord of the Air by the new wave sword and sorcery author Michael Moorcock. This book is number 1 in the Nomad of the Time Streams series. You'll know Michael Moorcock from his Elric saga. Anyhow, Warlord of the Air is a classic of the 1970s, 1971 actually, so this is considered to be one of the first steampunk novels ever written before the genre was even coined. But the premise here is that an Edwardian-era British soldier, Oswald Bastable, is stationed in India, and he's suddenly transported to an alternate future, to the late 20th century. And in this alternate reality, the world wars have never happened, and the technology is steam-based. So I guess there's all sorts of speculative technology here, like airships. So this one seems really fascinating, penned by one of the sci-fi and fantasy masters, still alive, I believe, actually. Next up at number 8, we have 1983's winner of the Philip K. Dick Award, Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. In 1801, the British have risen to power in Egypt and suppressed the worship of the old Egyptian gods. A cabal of magicians plan to drive the British out of Egypt by bringing the gods forward in time from an age when they were still powerful and unleashing them on London, thereby destroying the British Empire. In 1802, a failed attempt by the magicians to summon Anubis opens magical gates in a predictable pattern across time and space. Flash forward to the 1980s, where the aged millionaire J. Cochran Darrow has discovered the gates and found that they make time travel possible. Brendan Doyle, a specialist in the work of the early 19th century poet William Ashbless, reluctantly accepts an invitation from Darrow to act as a guide to time-traveling tourists. But while attending a lecture given by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in 1810, he becomes marooned in Regency London, where dark and dangerous forces know about the gates in time. Caught between rival bands of beggars, pursued by Egyptian sorcerers, and befriended by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Doyle somehow survives and learns more about the mysterious Ashbless than he ever could have imagined possible. Okay, so with a plot like that, you have me, I'm in. So this is Tim Powers' most celebrated, most acclaimed book. I don't really see how, by the description, how it's steampunk, but it's basically on all the lists of the best steampunk novels. So I will trust, I guess, that people aren't just full of hot air or full of steam. Okay, at number 7, we have 1987's Infernal Devices by the aforementioned K.W. Jeter. I feel like there's another Infernal Devices series by some young adult author that was published recently, so I wonder if the title was stolen for that. Anyways, Jeter's Infernal Devices is book 1 in the George Dower trilogy. Here is the synopsis. He inherited a watchmaker's store and a whole heap of trouble. But the idle, mediocre musician George has little talent for clockwork, and when a shadowy figure tries to steal an old device from the premises, George finds himself embroiled in a mystery of time travel, music, and sexual intrigue. As the story develops, George realizes his late father was more skilled than even he knew. His father had begun experimenting with building clockwork humans, and that his last project was an automaton who was an exact double of George himself, but with superior sexual abilities and a skill with the violin comparable to Paganini. Inevitably, a woman abducts George in the mistaken belief that she's captured his clockwork twin. Wow. So a little bit of automaton action there with the person made of gears and mistaken identity. Okay, so this sounds incredible and also very weird. Not sure how a woman wouldn't realize that the guy she's betting is an automaton with gears for guts. I feel like you would hear those gears turning in those intimate moments. But nevertheless, I have learned not to ask too many questions with books like this. Also, I like how book 3 in this series is called Grim Expectations. Obviously, a play there on Dickens's Great Expectations. All right, here's another one, Retribution Falls by Chris Wooding, Tales of the Ketty J, book number 1. Sky piracy is a bit out of Darian Frey's league. Fate hasn't been kind to the captain of the airship Ketty J or his motley crew. They're all running from something. Crake is a demonist in hiding, traveling with an armored golem, burdened by guilt. Jez is the new navigator, desperate to keep a secret from the crew. Malvery is a disgraced doctor, drinking himself to death. So when an opportunity arises to steal a chest of gems from a vulnerable airship, Frey can't pass it up. It's an easy take, and the payoff will finally make him a rich man. But when the attack goes horribly wrong, Frey suddenly finds himself the most wanted man in Vardia, trailed by bounty hunters, knights, and the dread queen of the skies, Trinica Draken. Frey realizes they've been set up to take a fall, but what's the endgame? In the end, the ultimate answer for captain and crew may lie in the legendary hidden pirate town of Retribution Falls. Okay, so this sounds amazing. And I've been told too that Wooding is a good writer. People seem to really dig his recent fantasy novel. I believe it's called The Ember Blade. Also, I gotta say, I love any good story that involves a ragtag crew of misfits and people with secrets and dark pasts and things like that. Kind of like Firefly and The Expanse, that sort of thing. And I think that would work well with steampunk too. So this one might have to move to the front of the line. Okay, number 5, Homunculus by James P. Blaylock. This one is 1986, and what is it about? Well, it is the late 19th century, and a mysterious airship orbits through the foggy skies. Its terrible secrets are sought by many, including the Royal Society, a fraudulent evangelist, a fiendish vivisectionist, an evil millionaire, and an assorted group led by the scientist and explorer Professor Langdon St. Ives. St. Ives? St. Ives? Can St. Ives keep the alien homunculus out of the claws of the villainous Ignacio Narbondo? Okay, so that synopsis makes very little sense to me, but you have me intrigued. You have my attention, Mr. Blaylock. So apparently this book is the second book in a trilogy. The first book in the series is called The Digging Leviathan. Pretty cool cover there. And the third one is called Lord Kelvin's Machine. Some steampunk goodness there. So I am fascinated to dive into this series and see where it goes. Number 4, Perdido Street Station by China Miéville. This one's from the year 2000. The metropolis of New Crobuzon sprawls at the center of the world. Humans, mutants, and arcane races brood in the gloom beneath its chimneys, where the river is sluggish with unnatural effluent and foundries pound into the night. For 1,000 years, the Parliament and its brutal militias have ruled over a vast economy of workers and artists, spies and soldiers, magicians, crooks, and junkies. Now, a stranger has arrived with a pocket full of gold and an impossible demand, and something unthinkable is released. The city is gripped by an alien terror. The fate of millions lies with the clutch of renegades. A reckoning is due at the city's heart, in the vast edifice of brick and wood and steel under the vaults of Perdido Street Station. And it's too late to escape. Okay, so I believe Perdido Street Station is some kind of train station, so you got the steam there. So this is book number 1 of the Bas Lag trilogy, and it's a classic of speculative fiction, I can tell you, and certainly one that I've been wanting to read for quite a while. It won the Arthur C. Clarke Award and has been ranked by Locus as the 6th all-time best fantasy novel published in the 20th century. Wow, that's pretty good. So this book is sometimes called weird fiction, sometimes urban fantasy, but the story's set in a world where both magic and steampunk technology exist, and that sort of thing. Michael Moorcock says it's massive and gorgeously detailed parallel world fantasy with a range of rather more exotic creatures, all of whom are wonderfully drawn. And then Moorcock went on to say that he is a writer with rare descriptive gift, an unusually observant eye for physical detail, for the sensuality and beauty of the ordinary human, as well as the thoroughly alien. So yeah, that is what we like. Very good. Number 3, the Leviathan trilogy by Scott Westerfeld, and I believe this ran from 2009 to 2012. And yes, guys, don't at me. This is a young adult novel. I wanted to put different types of books on this list. I didn't just want this list to be the original steampunks or, the sort of Michael Moorcock approved Critics' Choice books, but I wanted to include at least one book that is considered to be a classic YA steampunk series that, by the way, I am told is just as entertaining if you're an adult. So this one comes highly recommended. The story follows the airship pilot Darren, a girl who disguises herself as a boy, and the nascent heir to the Austrian-Hungarian throne, Prince Alexander, during the start of an alternative alternate World War I. This is true steampunk and all-out war, with one side of the conflict using mechanical war machines and roving mechanical airships, while the opposing side uses bioengineered creatures, living airships, and beasts. And I'm told that this book really does have a lot of interesting things to say about history, and that it kind of transcends this sort of young adult border, kind of transcends that YA zone. My wife actually read another one of Scott Westerfeld's books, Pretties and Uglies, I think it's called, and she really enjoyed it. I love these covers here. I'm typically not a fan of covers on the book, but in this case, these covers look pretty good. All right, here's another idiosyncratic pick that I'm really looking forward to reading. This is one I own but have not yet read, and that is 2010's Terminal World by Alastair Reynolds. This one is supposedly quasi-steampunk, so lots of steampunk elements, but it kind of breaks the mold a little bit. You could call it steam opera, and you'll see what I mean with this synopsis. Spearpoint, the last human city, is an atmosphere-piercing spire, a dark tower of truly vast size, housing more than 30 million people on 6 stratified levels. The levels are semi-autonomous city-states, each enjoying a different and rigidly enforced level of technology. Horsetown, for example, is pre-industrial. In Neon Heights, they have television and electric trains. Beyond Spearpoint, though, is the Outzone, where drug-addled land pirates, skullboys, and brain-eating cyber canines, carnivorgs, roam free. Not the cheeriest of places, sounds like, but it's into these badlands that Quillen, who works as a pathologist in his district's morgue, must venture, after a fallen angel from Spearpoint's highest zone warns him of what's to come. Quillen and his guide must battle the Skullboys, Carnivorgs, and countless other threats as they try to abscond to safety. However, even once they're taken aboard a Skullboy fighting airship, their journey is far from over. They soon discover the true origins of Spearpoint and revelations about the zonal boundaries that have kept its citizens apart for so long. Wow, I am already giddy to read this. This might have to go to the front of the line. So this sounds like this book is definitely part steampunk, but boy, what a crazy mongrel of a book. The Wikipedia description calls it equal parts steampunk, western, planetary romance, and far future sci-fi. And I've heard good things from folks like Moyd from Media Death Cult about this. And I am in. I'm telling you, I'm a huge fan of Alastair Reynolds. He writes these big, hard sci-fi, big idea, far futuristic sci-fi novels, and I really just respect the hell out of that guy. I should also mention Alastair Reynolds is a former astrophysicist. He has a PhD in the subject, and he actually worked, I believe, for the European Space Agency. So the guy knows how to make a sci-fi story feel real, and I can't wait to delve into this one. All right, capping off our list, drum roll please, we have The Aeronaut's Windlass by Jim Butcher. This one's from 2015. I don't think most people know that Jim Butcher of Codex Alera of Dresden Files fame actually wrote a steampunk novel. The Aeronaut's Windlass is the first novel of the Cinder Spire series, and I'm told that Butcher's steampunk is a bit more whimsical even than his urban fantasy, though there's also a good dose of drama in this book as well. So the novel takes place in a world in which humans live in, again, spires, huge cylindrical structures, thousands and thousands and thousands of feet tall and miles across. Spire Albion, which is governed by constitutional monarchy, is the main setting. Within the halls of these spires, ruling aristocratic houses develop scientific marvels, foster trade alliances, and maintain fleets of airships to keep the peace. Captain Grimm, what a good steampunk name there. Captain Grimm commands the merchant ship Predator for Spire Albion in their Cold War with Spire Aurora, disrupting the enemy's shipping lines by attacking Aurora's cargo vessels. But when the Predator is damaged in combat, Grimm joins a team of Albion agents on a vital mission. As Grimm undertakes this task, he learns that the conflict between the Spires is merely a premonition of things to come. Humanity's ancient enemy, silent for more than 10,000 years, has begun to stir once more, and death will follow in its wake. So this one is right up my alley, and I do love me some Jim Butcher. So you have noble families, steam-powered technology, magic-wielding warriors, talking cats. Apparently, there's also some really cool technology with vat-grown crystals, which are used to create these energy-based weapons and power ships and things like that. Also, even though this is said to be steampunk, I guess there are elements of swashbuckling fantasy and culture. And the setting also, I guess, is less similar to that of the 19th century and a little bit more the culture and setting closer to 18th century Europe, except instead of sailing ships over the wine dark seas, the ships are being sailed in the air. So pretty cool. Okay, that is going to be it for my list of 10. I thought I would close out here with some honorable mentions. Put them up here. You can see them. The Golden Compass, definitely the first book of his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, is steampunk. The reason I didn't put it on my list, it's a great book, is because I've already read it. And so this list was supposed to be books that I want to read. The Mortal Engines series by Philip Reeve. So these are some ones you could check out. I don't know that much about them. The Newberry and Hobbs Investigation series by George Mann. Airborne by Kenneth Opel. Anti-Ice by the very good sci-fi writer Stephen Baxter. Bone Shaker, The Clockwork Century by Sherry Priest. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. This would be a graphic novel by Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. I think they made that into a movie as well. Tim Akers, The Bane Writer. Heart of Veridon. I believe that's a series as well. It might be 3 parts or something like that. Clockwork Earth by Jay Lake. The classic fantasy writer S.M. Sterling writes The Peshawar Lancers. There is also Newton's Canon by J. Gregory Keyes. That one was written quite a while ago, I guess. And so that just some honorable mention books there, books to consider that didn't quite make my list, but are probably worth giving a read. So that's going to be it. We are running out of time. Thank you for watching. Please catch up with me on Facebook, Goodreads. Feel free to donate, tip your booktuber on Patreon. Also, don't forget to subscribe below. And until next time, happy reading.